13 years of hurt. The OVE9000 has been the punchline for so many joke builds over these years. Yes, it had undoubted utility, but players running two of these, especially on DSOD, had to be trolling, right? Well, be careful who you call ugly in high school, because as of the April update for Payday 2, these things have gone from the equivalent of glorified blowtorches for opening safes to actual bloody chainsaws, capable of ripping through entire crowds and leveraging the core skills this playstyle has access to. In short, they deal more damage with greater consistency at a lower ammo cost without all the visual quirks and disturbances that used to make them a bit of a nightmare to use. Not only are they viable options when caught out in a pinch, especially matching up well into shields, they're also straight up functional primaries at this point, as this challenge intends to showcase. In fact, they're so much stronger, we're going to find out if you can beat the entirety of Payday 2 with only the saw. Rules for this one are exceptionally straightforward. We want to beat the game's main career mode from the first bank heist to the White House, whilst only dealing damage with the saw. That means no throwables, no melee, and obviously no other form of ballistic damage. Amusingly, stealth is absolutely on the table still and encouraged, bearing in mind the silent motor was also buffed for this thing, making it a much more viable tool for that playstyle. Otherwise, there are no limitations in build and approach. I'll need to leverage skills and a fairly strong perk deck to counteract my complete lack of range, as even with its many buffs, you're still forced to go toe to toe with dozers at the best of times. As cool as it would be if this thing started shooting flying discs. That in mind, veterans of this series will already know that this challenge has effectively already been failed. There are two heists in the second half of the challenge that involve the mandatory takedown of snipers, which can't be reached by melee range weapons. For those heists only, I will be allowing myself to bring and fire the starting secondary pistol, the Kknowley, for use solely against those units, hampering my build, but making it at least feasible to keep going past the panic room roadblock. With no other range weapons available in this rule set, this is an unfortunate necessity. All the other usual challenge rules are still present though, meaning no grinding for cash or XP outside of the career mode heist, the career AI will be turned off outside of stealth where their assistance is immaterial, and no mods beyond my HUD mod, Vanilla HUD Plus for those of you interested, will be installed. Finally, for difficulty, as ever we go Mayhem until level 80, at which point we can turn up the heat for Death Wish. This is particularly important for this run, as I intend to run a special deck variation for the first half of it, which means I will level slower than usual, which is both a blessing and a curse. Rules out the way, let's jump into the first heist of the run, a convenient murky station which popped up almost immediately on CrimeNet. This is my preferred starting heist, especially when forced into pacifist mode by a rule set, as is the case here, with no money to buy my only source of damage. On the plus side, thanks to the recently released espionage pack for Payday 2, we have a new tool to keep tabs on the mercs around the station in the spy cam, effectively marking off one side of the heist, making it much safer to move around. Bearing in mind, even being spotted would have likely led to a restart. My luck held out for the full duration of this one though, securing the second EMP by the boat and kickstarting this run with ease. Back in the menus, I'm free to spend most of the cash I'll ever need to now, picking up a pair of saws for both my primary and secondary slots, equipped with a variety of attachments to optimise for both stealth and loud, with the silent and fast motor, as well as durable and sharp blades, all having their own times and places within this run. As for the perk deck, for the first time since the bloody Robin Hood run, I'm going stoic, but more on that decision and playstyle in just a moment, as we're planning on stealthing the jewelry store, which isn't really assisted by alcoholism. As usual, the key is to go for the safe in the back first, landing my first saw kill of the run on this poor bloke guarding the rear of the store. That was the extent of the arm resistance on this one, leaving me free to ransack the display cases without interruption. Although I can now bring more cable ties than before thanks to the crew AI update, a few civs are also bound for the meat grinder just to lower the risk of a slip up. Big fan of this guy's strategy of pretending he saw nothing to avoid meeting a similar fate, for a while at least. Cleaner costs are a non-issue for such an inexpensive rule set, so I'm not too worried, securing all 8 bags required to escape before moving on to the bank heist. This time we're going loud, mostly just to see how the saw is likely to hold up for the rest of the run, grabbing all the core skills up to Saw Massacre and going with a heavier armor setup to better augment my deck. You see, Stoic is a unique perk deck. Unlike most, which can only be run in one way and scale linearly with unlocked perks as intended, Stoic has the rare privilege of offering two of the best perk deck playstyles in a single package. If you don't go beyond the second perk here, you'll avoid trading your armor for health and instead just receive the innate damage reduction of 75% from the first perk Virtue, in addition to taking all that damage slowly over a 12-second window. Yes, you'll miss out on some of its luxury skills, such as the heal or automatic damage negation after 4 seconds, but in exchange, you'll still have an armor pool in addition to your health, which can of course regenerate as all regular perk deck armors do. We also still have the hip flask, meaning we don't need to accept 12 seconds of damage over time, all the time. The major trade-off is of course the bloody ceaseless sound of ticking health damage, but once you learn to tank that psychic damage, this is still up there with the best perk decks available, and can be at its max potential after just 2 heists, hence why I'm not particularly scared going straight into Loud at level 34. The Saw is also more than decent against dozers, and actually matches up really well into shields. Tasers and snipers are a serious problem, but we'll have ways to handle at least one of those two shortly. Even so, this was a straightforward Loud clear of the bank heist so early into the run. Despite the confidence that obviously gave me, it's not enough to convince me lugging 14 bags across downtown DC on Diamond Store is a good idea, instead choosing to go silent and further test the bounds of these new stealth tools. For one, the silent saw saving me 20 combined seconds of lockpicking is already a godsend. As a stealth weapon, it's not exactly optimal, but with good timing and movement, it's still possible to sneak up on guards and launch them directionally, at least somewhat, resulting in a perfect clear out of all guards on the heist early into attempt 1. Unfortunately, my hubris got the better of me when I completely forgot to use the keycard to turn off the alarm glass, and ended up forcing things loud by getting overzealous for the loot. A pain, but a relatively minor setback in the grand scheme of things, as I massacred my way back into a controlled lobby situation even faster on attempt 2, lugging all bags over to the van in under 8 minutes. You'll notice I went for all loot because I'm attempting to squeeze as much XP out of these missions as possible. One drawback of stopping at perk 2 in Stoic is that I don't get my passive XP bonus, which does mean the journey to level 80 will be slower than usual. This is an advantage to some degree, but delaying being able to max out the deck is a pain I'd rather not draw out for too long once we finally up the difficulty to Deathwish. Back on track with what's going on your screen, Go Bank Loud is the only way I'll really run it these days, and with so much of the heist taking place spitting distance, the sword doesn't feel at all out of place whilst holding out at the thermal drill. Where things get a little spotty is when moving and setting up the loot cage bags on the roof of the bank. Bearing in mind, I don't have a single tool in my build for dealing with snipers, and I'm frankly food for these guys when out in the open. Avoiding my impending obligation, as all good players should, I decided to instead secure a money bag from the safety of the now wide open vault. This is the one thing my build is properly kitted out for, which is a relief as it still took me a while to find a deposit box loaded with cash, saved from an agonizing death at the hands of this taser through the addition of shotproof to my build, one of the best bang for your buck skills in the game when running a daft rule set such as this one. Enough procrastinating, it's time to face my fears on the roof, absolutely devouring about 4 sniper rounds just a few seconds after getting up there, and unable to stem the bleeding even through crystallized alcoholism, as the suppression mechanic prevented my armor from ever coming back. But this is where the power of Virtue Stoic shines through regardless, juggling first aid kits and damage build-up resets for long enough to pull the ripcord and guarantee at least an attempt at the escape. Hiding back out in my one safe refuge, the vault, few dared to enter the meat grinder, and those who didn't last for long. Once the sewers opened up, I had one final close call, going through my last few FAKs to guarantee safe passage, just about, trudging my way to a successful first-time escape, even up against one of the most sniper-heavy heists in the early game. On the opposite end of that coin, we have Transport Overpass, one of the sniperless armoured transports that I always love rolling into. Whilst the saw is again excellent for opening up deposit boxes once inside the vehicles, my build is also much more skill dependent than on most runs, meaning I'm locked out of using C4 to speed this one along. Still, with the pre-placed ammo bag asset, which has already been doing work for me on this run, it was simple enough to clear this one in just over 10 minutes, with 93 kills by the way. But before the update, I'm not sure I could have dreamed of these sorts of numbers, or only, if you want an easy yardstick to see how this playstyle has improved. Transport downtown is sadly a sniper-filled experience, making for a much less relaxed heist, running across the road and knowing every time I was going to need some meds on the other side. Also, have you ever seen your drill break with 0.0 seconds left on it? That's a highly specific form of Payday suffering for you to enjoy on my behalf, because I was fairly displeased. Fortunately, even without uppers aced, first aid supply is extremely generous, keeping morale, and me coming back to tank up a few more sniper rounds again and again, dragging 5 bags of gold over to the escape for another laboured first time clear. Now, as much as I'm sure I could approach the train heist in Loud, I'd rather not choose to stroll into a sniper's paradise without at least seeing what stealth holds in store for the saw build. Attempt 1, it wasn't all that promising, managing to drop a body bag directly in front of this guard, which resulted in a classic domino effect stealth failure, as it felt like every guard was simultaneously drawn to this spot like wasps to some wacky pheromones. Attempt 2 didn't even make it 30 seconds in before I rolled a reset, although I pulled things together on run 3 despite a less than ideal start. Whilst I usually tend to conserve pages on this one, it's actually not a bad thing picking up a few early kills, as when I'm able to guarantee close range silent encounters, I might as well. Moving all 23 bags on this one is laborious enough without leaving every guard on the map alive, and the huge advantage of this setup is that the Silent Saw can now once again crack open these railcars with virtually no risk, meaning no more fishing for keycards or, God forbid, rolling the dice with drills. Not to mention, the spy cams can now cover both sides of the train tracks, giving me almost perfect information whilst around the riskiest section of the heist. With this in mind, within just a few minutes I was already into the railcar with the TF2 sentry parts, securing those by hand down by the river, saving the zipline placement for later. A heart-in-mouth moment at the staircase nearly saw a sad end to this one, but I again picked up a couple of kills to keep things under wraps and bring the guard population down to a measly 7, meaning I was mostly free to shuttle these bags up and down with excellent vision on those patrols. Thus ensues almost 15 minutes of bag moving, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, never mind my beloved viewers, so forgive me as I spare you the tedium and tell you it was alright. A smooth third time clear of what can be a really tricky stealth heist at times. The early hump of Bane's heist out the way, Vlad likes to throw us a bone next with a flurry of straightforward completions. For a heist as simple as 4 stores, I can risk switching over to C4, meaning escape was on its way within 30 seconds. It even did me the courtesy of pulling in directly next to where I was holding out, making for a frictionless clear. More Crasher is a bit more of a pain, bearing in mind we only have a pair of saws with which to deal 50 grand worth of property damage, but in the absence of grenades to chuck, I was able to break the Falcagini the old-fashioned way, and brought the gasoline to set up a few bonus fires around the place. Remember, you get more value for your breakages if you do them one at a time, so whilst it looks daft, smashing the wine store up bottle by bottle is surprisingly effective, also providing a nice sanctuary to hold out in whilst waiting for the chopper's arrival, alongside this poor lass who was seemingly frozen out of fear. Yet, that's what we'll go with. I have no idea why civs in this game seem to somehow bug out more than they did 13 years ago. White Xmas is also an easy heist, at least when you're not searching for the elusive Almir's toast, as I was on the no money run. We do lack the luxury of an ammo bag asset here, but this one straight up doesn't last long enough for that to really be a problem, simply hiding out from the snipers and making a clean getaway with ready to use blades still in the tank. Rarely do I cock up Ukrainian job this badly, but there's a first time for everything, and this is only setting us back about 20 seconds. I just about managed the pager juggle on the run back before utilising the tried and true dominate into saw blade to the chops method to prevent that 10% chance of the remaining security randomly firing a bullet. A couple of minutes of drilling later and the tiara was in the bag. Now, Meltdown is a different beast, bringing in murky water and their uniquely irritating dozer variants, in addition to probably the toughest sniper-filled gauntlet so far. The back and forth within the warehouse was the usual fare, again playing at my preferred engagement ranges risked fairly little, and within minutes I'd turn the inside of the temperature control vault into the house Jack built. But once out in the open, chugging along with 8 warheads on my forklift, the equation changes somewhat. The vehicle dodge bonus is genuinely the only thread of hope keeping me upright, although the trade-off is you can't drink and drive. Good to see that's where the boys draw the criminal line. After trying to fit my truck through a gap it was clearly not meant to pass through, I was left scrambling for first aid on a couple of occasions, before deciding to instead grab the Longfellow and reverse it into position. This adaptation saved the day as I used its open boot for sniper cover, before making a break for the first nuke run. The driving section is the easy part, where things get nasty is on the return trip, with only 4 FAKs remaining, and only just now realising I'd lost half the warheads on the first journey over. With my objectives scattered, I attempted to hide out for the end of the assault, but that simply increased the risk of exposure, just about surviving this taser interaction thanks to Shotproof, which kicked me into action. Now or never, I managed to get the muscle car into place before making the pilgrimage back to grab a fresh, unstuck forklift. Like salmon swimming upstream, few make it back, but I'm one of the lucky ones, avoiding permanent virgin status and refueling the Longfellow with nuclear power for the final drive back to the escape. Honestly, I did not anticipate making it through this one at the first time of asking. I mean, it was a 20-minute plus slog, and I was down to my last bit of healing by the end, but Armored Stoic is absolutely the real deal on Mayhem, even into 6 unkillable snipers. That earned optimism flowed into Aftershock, another potentially tricky sniper-heavy heist with some of the widest sightlines in the entire game, not exactly what you love to see when performing a robbery with a pair of saws in your hands. Fortunately, I rolled the late sniper spawn, meaning they weren't giving me the extra grief until the truck was already half loaded with safes. Again, vehicle heists do offer us some extra tankiness during these sections, meaning I pulled up the escape with only 2 FAKs used. Rather than sprint back into the line of sight of snipers, I remained at the building site, holding up next to this inexplicably erect shield for perfect cover. Also, did you know these fences could be sawed open? I didn't. There's no value to knowing this, as it's just a spawn point that's out of bounds to the player, but I really do learn something new and entirely useless on every one of these challenges I perform. As Meltdown's easier cousin, this one was in the bag as soon as I parked up the truck. Nightclub next, and I hate this heist. The fact that the top floor safe can be spotted in stealth from the opposite side of the club always feels like an oversight, and I rue the day they added the Titan safes. Note, this gameplay was also filmed before the more recent removal of Titan cams on this heist, also upping the risk of stealth. Attempts 2 and 3 went pear-shaped, both times due to getting spotted and breaking eyeline, which always results in loud shots fired. Attempt 4 was far cleaner, although that just gives me more things to complain about because who thought a 4-minute drill into 3-minute wait for escape was acceptable for stealth when there's bugger all else to do for that period of time. As far as snooze fest heists go, Nightclub absolutely takes the cake, even when you can use the spy cam to help pass the time. After 10 minutes of boredom, the escape was also on the wrong side of the map, requiring me to saw down the poor fellow who just called me a class act, the one compliment I get all run, tearfully escaping this one without any additional torture. At least stealing Xmas was basically made for the saw build, enabling me to skip through most of the initial objectives down in the mall. Also, I've been thinking, there's just something very funny about taking a hostage with a love tap from a circular saw. For once, I really can't blame the cop for giving up so easily. With these lemmings at my side, I was able to activate Hostage Taker for its healing, which is necessary as I'm running C4 here, and that's my only source of regen. Thankfully it paid off with just a few touch and go moments, placing the chargers up on the roof before heading back down for another first time clear. That's flat out the way for now, time for Hector and Watchdogs, where for the first time in a long time I get to use the secret saw only exit to leave the van early. I'm not sure how helpful it is, bearing in mind the cops just immediately blew up the van as they noticed my feet between the tyres, but I loved how creative they used to get with saw utility back when the game first released. Watch Dogs After Dark is still a fairly easy heist, securing the bags necessary to call in the escape and making it onto day 2 without much incident. The second day's easier still, even with a fair few unexpected dozer spawns trying to throw a spanner in the works. No major issues for this akimbo saw build, another clear in the bag. Fire starters, a nice heist for fans of utility options. Hell, you can even use the saw to blow up the gas tanker to burn the rifles faster, although I wouldn't recommend doing this without a deck like Stoic equipped. Unfortunately, the first warehouse only had 3 bags to destroy, meaning I was left spending the next 5 or so minutes lugging the remaining weapons up the hill, again without much interruption. The saw also speeds up access to the server barrier on day 2, meaning despite a taser's best efforts right by the escape, I was able to make it out in 6.5 minutes. Day 3 is just a bank heist runback, this time with a hell of a lot more tools and tankiness at my disposal, meaning instead of hiding in the teller's booth, I mostly took the fight to the cops inside, even clearing out the few safety deposit boxes just because I can. One of the most straightforward heists of the run so far. And difficulty is not likely to spike just yet, with rats next on the radar. Although the snipers covering the meth lab are a little annoying, the SWATs really have to come to me on this one, and that's where the saw is in its element, cutting most wall climbers down before they've made it in through the windows. In fact, if you catch them just right with this strategy, you can hit the jackpot on the ragdoll lottery, just like me here. There's really not much jeopardy to the cook-off portion of this one these days, so we move on to a simple day 2, trading for the intel before stealing the product back just for the thrill of it, and heading onto the bridge for day 3, where yet again the saw proved its ragdoll potential, hanging this Mendoza upside down in aeroplane mode before racing to another heist victory. After that brief reprieve, the difficulty switch really gets turned up a notch for the elephant's jobs, starting with Big Oil. The ECM strategy I normally use is pretty foolproof, unless of course you're running a stoic, saw-only stealth build. Yet there's no guarantee you can take out all the bikers in 2 ECMs with this one, as I found on attempt 2. And even if you do, without the hip flask in my build, it's entirely possible to go down to just these standard bikers, much to my embarrassment on attempt 3. I was much more focused on attempt 4 as a result, and my reward for persistence in stealth was genuinely fantastic assets for day 2, finding a keycard and plane key for the escape. I also pillaged the ATMs down in the basement, again, just because I can really. It's the saw for God's sake. Day 2 is a far less black and white experience though. The keycard got me straight into the security room without needing to use a loud saw, but unfortunately cams had already spotted me, meaning we need to deal with 3 minutes of this hack being incessantly turned off. Not ideal, but not the end of the world either. When shields aren't randomly ramping me into the sky, the saw counters them extremely well, and the same is now actually true, I've realised, of shield marshals, usually the banes of my challenge runs, who now get nullified by a quick serrated saw blade to the chops. After picking out the right engine, this one was all but in the bag, of course getting the plane escape, which is much faster than the chopper variations. Somehow I just managed to spend longer on day 1 of Big Oil than day 2. Framing frame next, picking off a few of the guards using the usual hand dryer technique in the bathrooms, in addition to sawing open the camera room, meaning I could save on the keycard asset. Even if this one happened to go loud, it was fine without QAI and the ability to cut through the bars post-alarm, but I still tried to keep things silent for an easier day 2, surviving this little mishap at the front desk guard to keep things under wraps with 4 paintings in the bag. Day 2 is uneventful as a result, although as ever, when I get the opportunity with the saw on this one, I love to use this hidden path through the sewers. Why we saw such a cool mechanic of openable shortcuts wasting a heist that barely has combat at the best of times, I will never know. But I think it's even more criminal they didn't add more of these saw or C4 lock paths to later heists. This is from a time when Payday was attempting to be more of an immersive sim, and I really miss that. Day 3 is always a mess, and I'd rather not slog my way through the stealth experience, which mostly can be boiled down to moving bags and fiddling with butt cases. Instead, my particular poison is dealing with cops turning off the power to a PC hack for the best part of 7 minutes. At least I can get it started easier than usual thanks to the saw. And to be fair, my powerbox RNG was solid, able to defend at least 2 at once, which is better than the usual layout. As a result, this was only about 2/3 as torturous an experience as it usually is, sprinting around like a headless chicken in an attempt to keep their filthy mitts off the power. At least I had lots of ammo from the pre-planning, meaning this also turned into a bit of a bloodbath, the highest kill heist so far at over 150. Unbelievably, I didn't even use a first aid kit, that's just how strong this build is for mayhem, with hostage taker healing now built in at all times. Sub 13 is also crazy fast for this day, so I have 0 complaints. Election day is normally a non-issue in stealth, even when going the plan A route, but messing around with my stealth equipment left me ECM-less for attempt 1, leading to one of the first resets I can recollect on this heist. The run back was just as untidy, but at least this time I had ECM jammers to cover my tracks, guessing the correct truck to tag by process of colour elimination, and escaping onto day 2 at the warehouse. This is the silent saw's bread and butter thanks to opening up these cages painlessly, although I was once again punished for not running ECMs on attempt 1. Salvaging the situation initially thanks to a saw commando lunge, but then forgetting that you can't perform the hacks in front of a camera, which is extra annoying when I couldn't reach the bastard to put it on loop, requiring an instant restart. I made the executive decision to drop the camera boy in attempt 2 with that in mind, clearing a path to hack the first few voting machines without fear. Some rotten timing nearly threw this one into jeopardy as well as 2 guards turned this corner simultaneously, but I just about held my nerve, deciding to simply rush the last 3 hacks under ECM cover after once again adapting to add them back into my build, guaranteeing yet another comparatively bloody stealth completion. Big Bank is up next as the dentist enters the picture, but with access to assets once more, this one's relatively simple, limiting my exposure to snipers with the thermite vault entrance and effectively hiding out inside the security room for its entire uninterruptible duration. Occasionally, I'd remind the Washington PD who was boss, but for the most part, this one was entirely risk-free. Once inside the vault, the saw makes quick work of opening the loot cages, and with the elevator trick set up, I didn't have far to travel with the 4 bags necessary to open up the escape. Hotline Miami Day 1 generally scales quite linearly in difficulty in my experience, with the mobster elimination section normally offering a nice leisurely welcome. But here, with only saws equipped, it was where the challenge really peaked, having to intentionally face tank an entire claymore without the ability to clear them from range. This must have left my ears ringing, as I failed to notice I needed to reload my saw before entering the next motel room, and actually got soloed by a regular mobster. Deciding just not engage with that potential embarrassment on attempt 2, for once I basically just left them to time out, which will happen after a couple of minutes on this heist if you weren't aware. It does mean the parking lot is already surrounded by the time you get to lighting the cars on fire, which is far from ideal, but at least the saw can apparently ignite gasoline still. Although I took another beating from snipers, I was able to clear the primary objectives outside of the motel with a bit more emergency triage, ripping the hidden basement door off its hinges before speeding up the address hack with my saw's gate-destroying abilities once again. I know this is a fairly randomized objective, but I swear this machine's never located the commissar within a minute and a half as it did here, meaning I was free to sprint to victory, clearing back a few wasted minutes at the start of this one. Day 2 is also sped along by the saw, racing to the penthouse suite within a couple of minutes, and tearing through the fixed spawn green dozers that so often cause problems. Although this heist has crazy sniper coverage, it's totally possible to just hide out in one of these side rooms, especially when you have express close range damage, as we currently do. Also, being able to tank up the rocket fire I always leave to cover the drill is a nice bonus of drinking on the job, meaning I really just need to take care of myself, and then the commissar once his vault opens up, stun locking him into an impressive barrel roll maneuver which might have gotten him a 10 from the judges, but isn't enough to keep him breathing on my watch, sprinting out of this one just a few seconds later. One thing to note is that this is usually the moment where things get turned up a notch and Death Wish awaits, but as mentioned earlier, without the bonus 45 XP from my perk deck, I'm leveling a lot slower, which is a double-edged sword under this rule set. That means I can get away with much more, but I'm lacking a few luxury skills I'd normally like to have at this stage. For example, there's no way I can fit Feign Death into my build, meaning when running up against this Skulldozer with hardly any health remaining, there's no way I'm getting back up again. Attempt 2 on Hoxton Breakout didn't go much better, first being held off at the main road, unable to secure a Joker, and pushed back into the Kaiser building we start in, but even after getting free, I slipped up at the Falconi dealership, again overestimating my ability to trade into Skulldozers, tased and buffeted around in front of one who put me down swiftly before I could even place an FAK. I learned from these mistakes on attempt 3, pushing ahead of the truck with Hoxton inside, instead of getting bogged down next to it, making it inside the garage this time with 13 first aid kits remaining. But as has been my luck lately, I open every door but the control room one, before finally stumbling into it over 10 minutes in. The saw meant this was at least faster than facing down a 20-second lockpick each time, but the problem was I was down to my last functioning saw blade. Ammo bags are starting to look that bit more tempting, but I'm gonna need jack of all trades first. Still, even rationing the remaining blade out, I was able to make it through onto day 2. For once, my perk deck prevented any quick-fire deaths at the hands of the glass cannon FBI units, getting them on side for the holdout in the server room. For the second time on this heist, a purely RNG objective decided to ruin my day, holding me at the archives for a couple of minutes while searching for Hoxton's case file, but on the plus side, the price we pay here is mostly just boredom. The server objective I rolled next made up for it, before using up a keycard I'd held back to refill my saws from the ammo room. I always loved the way Hoxton Breakout handled assets by sort of building them into the decisions you make in Heist. I think it's a shame so many of these fun ideas were never really followed up on. Anyway, with more than enough saw ammo to kill an entire army, I was never in any danger of running out for the final ops room defense section, grabbing the server and lugging it over to the escape, which I needed to drill for once after using up that keycard earlier. Hoxton Revenge is up next, another excuse to test out the saw stealth build, which has really excelled for me so far. Unfortunately, did me no favours in attempt 1, after needing to pick up 2 early kills, one of which was spotted, whilst I failed to learn my lesson on attempt 2 when that same body was spotted rapidly. Attempt 3 went much smoother though, sneaking in through the front gate and utilising one of my favourite hidden stealth strategies on this heist, sneaking my way inside without needing to worry about the alarm box by moving in tandem with security. High risk but high reward as it gets us in safely, although it comes at the cost of 2 pages. Still, it was the start I needed to open the door to Hector and give him the serrated surprise as soon as he walked out of the panic room. Now just need to secure the evidence for a clean getaway. which lucked all but in the bag with 5 down, until I took a stupid risk leaping over for bag number 6, getting caught on the ladder and spotted from below, giving me just a few seconds to make it back. I secured the bag before Twitch pulled away, but not the escape, meaning I was left going loud with a full set of QAI, which, as you know all too well, is against the rules. After reconsidering my life choices for a few seconds and a brief rage runback, I begrudgingly reset and decided to take it out on the cops by going loud this time, giraffifying this bloke out of sheer frustration. Early Skulldozer spawns don't really threaten this setup, leaving me a little bit confused as to why I even bothered trying to stealth this one, not even needing to engage with the snipers thanks to the Vault spawn, which I initially feared could dominate the landscape on this one. Like the Commissar before him, Hector fell once again to the stunlock effect of the saw I rammed into his helmet, meaning I just needed to secure the evidence in Bar's chopper on the rooftop this time to ensure I could actually leave without any last minute abandonment. Learning nothing, I spent the next 5 attempts on the diamond bashing my head against stealth for some reason. I mean, the saw is hardly even advantageous here, slightly increasing the speed of opening doors, but doing little else other than making silent kills hard to come by. Attempt 2 particularly pissed me off, meticulously making my way across the pressure puzzle only for it to raise back up whilst I was on my way back with the gemstone, failing yet another stealth heist on the cusp of victory. A couple of tilted sub-30 second cock-ups followed, when it rains it pours, before I again made it to the first time lock, only to think I could literally get away with murder. This guy shot first, requiring another swift restart. Still, I persevered this time for some reason, actually getting caught out AFK whilst in the final exhibit room, which was yet another scare I didn't need, before finally locking in and completing the Sanctum puzzle with time to spare on the way back. A cleanish completion of a heist I undoubtedly would have been better off just taking on in loud. Golden Grin is too much of a slog in stealth for even me, with my seemingly infinite hubris to tackle with Saw stealth, meaning we again get to go to town painting the casino red. The absolute firing squad of snipers lining both sides of the building gave me a good grilling during the early sections of this one, but that damage is entirely temporary with Stoic 2 of 9, meaning we move on to the more challenging BFD defense section relatively unscathed, save by the ammo bag you get for free with your C4 entrance asset. Progress is sluggish these days after they made SWATs a bit better at focusing on interrupting the objective, but nothing a quick sawing can't sort out, with the laser cutter a chip off the old block, cutting a hole into the vault after just over 20 minutes. That's the back of this one broken, with very little between us and a stroll to the limousine with the coffer intact. I'd absolutely love it if they randomly chuck some totally unexplained loot type like this at us in Payday 3, but alas, I don't think we'll ever see the day. Back to the run, this finally dings us to level 80, 4 heists slower than usual, which normally coincides with the completed perk deck. Foolishly, despite how well my limited deck had served me, I saw this as an opportunity to turn my back on Virtue Stoic for the complete deck, if only to speed up leveling. Now I'm running Death Wish. Sadly though, I didn't do the maths. I'm still a couple of heists short of full Stoic, and have basically just hamstrung myself in loud for no particular reason, just in time for the potentially sniper-heavy bomb heist. As ever, we go with the dockyard, but now, more than ever, my stealth obsession has become a necessity. On the plus side, with spy cams and asset cams, it's fairly easy to keep most guards on this heist marked at all times, making movement much safer than usual. With both keycards located just a couple of minutes into the heist, I wasted more time than I care to admit attempting to parkour my way up the side of this building, only to get spotted as a result and needing to do some quick-fire body disposal. This was far from the only scare I had in this run, with a Civ sneaking up on me right when the Moretta pulled into the dock, which is never advisable when someone's handling heavy machinery. After turning him into pre-chewed fish food, I was clear to ransack the ship for bomb parts and secure the first time clear on this one. Still short of perk deck XP though, it's Scarface Mansion up next, which scares me infinitely more. You see, the idea of solo stealthing this one using only a saw really calls out to me, so full deck or not, you better believe I'd be slamming this one regardless. My usual approach of clearing out the pageless guards obviously doesn't lend itself to this challenge's constraints, but just try telling me that. 11 attempts in total ended with me awkwardly getting shot up by the first few guards you run into, either fatally, because surprisingly Stoic is still not a stealth perk deck since last we checked, or just enough to be heard by every other Soza underling around the mansion. On the couple that made it further, I inevitably ended up getting spotted dealing with Mr. Greensuit, or just had an alerted guard march in front of the camera, interspersed between 30-second long shit shows. However, on the fated attempt 12, things finally came together, just skirting around most of the guards by spawn and praying I wouldn't ever need to run the loop back past them. This time the head of security spawned to the west of the mansion in the one slightly less open location, enabling me to get my hands on the USB stick with only a handful of kills. I cleared up the docks to the best of my ability before double clicking the laptop hack to ensure it wouldn't be interrupted, something only possible in solo play, meaning I just needed to hold it together for the more classic stealth experience inside. By some miracle, the two guards on patrol outside the office fell out of sync, failing to notice the spinal severing that took place, leaving their boss equally at my mercy. Now, although he looks like easy pickings stood to the side of his desk, this is actually a bit of a nightmare, as if I allow him to spot me and access his full health bar, a bullet is almost certain to be fired. That's why I had to dive across the room like this, as when unalerted, he'll still go down to a single hit, performing that assassin's love tap before opening up the floor safe to secure 6 bags of loot, which I just need to take over to the already mostly cleared out docks thanks to that merciful escape spawn. Not sure what I would have done if they'd taken me back to the entrance, almost certainly it would have sent me back to sub 1 minute attempt at purgatory. That's the final step in achieving a complete stoic perk deck though, just in time for the absolute layup, which is Crime Spree. After buying the first 20 levels, I rolled into a prison nightmare, a lesser witness heist on these challenges as it can only show up during the Crime Spree section. Although it can throw headless dozers at you, as their health bar is still just scaled to overkill difficulty, they're not the potential hurdle they could be, and the other random effects like fire and drills are fairly easy to just not walk into. A cool heist we rarely get to see, but not much to speak of on the difficulty front. Counterfeit though is where we get to start feeling it, the first Death Wish difficulty heist taken on with standard stoic and loud. It honestly went appallingly. I forgot my saw wasn't silenced and rang the cop alarm bell almost immediately, and then got myself completely melted, failing to pull off a hip flash sip to prevent my doom. The run back went marginally better, but let me tell you, I can feel the added challenge Death Wish brings more on this setup than I have of late. Being forced into melee range is extra punishing when cop melee hits slap harder and tasers spawn in much higher numbers. There's honestly nothing more frustrating than getting knocked all over the place when trying to slip the saw between a dozer's visor plates, needing to become a bit of an FAK addict to survive the first assault wave, let alone set up and defend the hose once the snipers started spawning in. Basically, I just had to distract the cops trying to turn off the valve without hanging around too long on the front lawn for fear of sniper lasers from all directions. Seeing this, I'm absolutely bricking Slaughterhouse. Even so, this heist eventually just sort of completes itself, avoiding a nightmare failure down with the dozer spawns in the sewers to secure that first loud Death Wish clear. That gave me confidence heading into First World Bank, making it past the sniper covered drilling section without too many hiccups. After just about carving up the 4 fixed green dozer spawns in the vault, this one seemed like it would be in the bag. But speaking of bags, it was far harder to move them into the loot chute than usual at this stage, again massively hampered by the crowd control combo of cop melee and these ludicrous taser spawns. Even with basic shotproof, with no guarantee of the stun effect breaking in time, I was at the mercy of RNG, which fell through over 19 minutes into this attempt, held still and prevented from reaching for the flask, whilst the army of regular cops surrounding me did the dirty work. In a reversal of Hoxton revenge, this was enough to send angry signals to my brain telling me I needed to try stealth instead, at least until I could afford shotproof aced, but this turned out to be a mistake, failing the next 3 attempts mostly due to cock-ups around this particular corridor as it's a blind turn, before I also forgot this guard patrol always turns around immediately after taking this watch. It was just a matter of time before I got things right though, taking out this fella after another slip up around the head office, but making up to the vault without another incident. Here, with 3 pages remaining, I was free to drop all the guards who patrol this zone, removing any risk from a comparatively relaxing bag moving session. Unfortunately, the civs next door need to be silenced permanently before securing the bags in the garbage truck, but those are acceptable losses at this stage in the run. Murky Station presents even more stealth opportunities to cock up, but seeing as this is the second time we're running this heist and I had literally no skills during the first, I really wouldn't have any excuse, so just about managed the concentration required to complete this one without picking up a single kill. Boiling Point forces us loud now, but at least I have shotproof in the build to avoid another taser scramble. The open tundra isn't my dream combat setting for a build with the range of my arm, but the dozer spawns were kind upon entering the lumber mill. Once inside the compound, I'm again at the whims of RNG, as a rooftop turret would be a permanent fixture, but fortunately one only spawned in the main lobby, meaning I was free to scan the bodies relatively undisturbed. Now I can rub these cables together. I mean, this dozer just straight up disappearing in front of my eyes was a little disturbing, but I suppose it was also kind of advantageous, so I shouldn't complain. Of course, the difficulty really spikes on this one during the escape, but I found myself halfway across the snowfield before any of them even zeroed in on me, at which point I still had a dozen FAKs to face tank my way through to the plane and make for a perfect set of Jimmy first time clears. Lately, I've been noticing though, it's actually Santa's workshop of all things that gives me trouble around this time in the run, keeping up that record of stealing a couple of minutes from me when I struggled to secure a joker to split the aggro. Despite surviving this horribly timed flashbang scenario, I was still whittled down a couple of seconds later. On attempt 2, I remembered to not overstay my welcome within that little passageway, as I swear it's where all my troubles on this heist take place, gnawing my way through a pair of minigun dozers who actually aren't too much of an issue for this setup to handle. There aren't too many places to hide on this heist, but thanks to the stun effect of Saw Massacre, I was avoiding taking the full force of every cop on the map, securing the 4 required presents after a drawn out back and forth with the cops, attempting to move them in the opposite direction, before sprinting straight for the exit. Car shop next, an easy stealth mission at this stage of the run, although I was momentarily thrown off when I couldn't locate the correct IT technician's PC. That's because apparently they gave this guy the head office, which is a relatively rare occurrence, wasting a couple of minutes on the search. Once the hack's ticking though, there's little else to worry about, other than remembering which side of the road Americans drive on. Once I had that down, this one was in the bag with time to spare. With the biker heist up next, I made a long overdue build switch, taking off the sharp blade, which is useful for speeding up the saw's safe cracking potential, but not really necessary damage, in favour of the durable blade, as I was running out of ammo much more frequently than on Mayhem, mostly as a result of sheer cop density. Attempt 1 at this ended prematurely as I fumbled around with my FAK placement, not dropping it in time to stay on my feet via uppers. Attempt 2 started much more promisingly though. Not only was the mechanic in the infinitely superior spawn not covered by a bloody SWAT turret, I tore up this fixed Skulldozer spawn before he could cause any mischief. Defending the mechanic is a bit of a pain when you can't deal any range damage, but this is where Stoic really comes to the fore, and why I don't think this run would have made it even this far without the deck. That ability to tank damage knowing it won't have a permanent impact is unmatched, allowing me to run up to the perpetrator without fear of the many lasers pointing at my head. Objective rolls weren't too bad until we had to march the mechanic across the garage, but at least the Saw sped this one along, keeping him covered for the duration without needing to risk a trip outside. The sniper overwatch was a nightmare, but my FAKs once again saved the day, hopping on the bike after just over 16 minutes, taking a swig for a little Dutch courage, and making my way to the escape without another incident. Day 2 is always a bit of an RNG fest, but taking a pair of jokers early into the sprint down the train is a massive advantage for splitting the aggro. I thought I was soft-locked upon reaching this room, but it turns out you can still reach the ladder with a little parkour. The biker boss was my most formidable foe thus far, taking 3 whole saw blades to the face before finally hitting the deck, not even getting stunned by this assault like Hector or the Commissar. Although this held me up, it didn't have a material impact on this attempt, as I managed to just leave this minigun dozer in the dust and charge back to the rear of the train with ammo still to spare in both of my saws. Shockingly, a first time clear. Panic Room is next, a heist on which I have to sadly admit defeat. With the sniper spawns preventing Bar from ever dropping C4, we need a ranged tool to deal with them, and although my jokers could theoretically pick up these kills, the odds of them doing so, especially for well-covered spawns, are exceptionally slim, as we've found out from runs in the past. So after turning Chavez into Swiss cheese and successfully sawing the Panic Room free using these pretenders to the throne, it's time to break the rules and pull out the Shimano 88. I know we invented lifelines and the rule breaker lifeline specifically in the past to deal with this, but this isn't the only heist requiring it sadly, so I can't even use that as an excuse. Shedding a tear for each horribly inaccurate shot fired on the scumbags who love to ruin my most interesting challenge run rule sets. Still, doing so kinda neuters me as I'm left with just a single saw worth of ammo to deal with all the other cops charging me on the roof, so I at least take some solace in the fact this heist is far from a walk in the park, even when breaking the rules. With the snipers out the way, outside of a few struggles getting the C4 planted, undoubtedly rescued by uppers whilst placing this final charge, that's the back of this one broken. As I've learned over time, the key to completing the next few objectives, which require the roof to be cleared, is to simply run away and down to the lower floors of the building. This slowly baits all the cops down here, at which point you can simply sprint beyond them to clear the few broken AI stragglers left, stopping Bar from doing his job. In fact, after tying the magnet to the panic room, the final defense section just sort of fizzled out as the cops were too busy spawning in down by me to prevent Bar's escape with all the cash. I know I had to break the core rule of this one, but a 20-minute panic room is pretty much unheard of from me no matter the rule set, so I'm happy to take this one to the bank and never look back. Brooklyn 1010 is the second of the two heists where Chimano use is begrudgingly allowed, and it's even more necessary here, as this sniper needs to go before Charon does his thing, and you can't even call on a Joker for assistance. Begrudgingly I took the shot, before also firing down on the responding NYPD to clear access to the second half of the heist. Although we're locked away from the asset ammo bag, it's no issue here as we can just saw open this ammo store immediately, but these increased Deathwish taser spawns are starting to get to me. This has to be the most I've ever used shotproof haste, and it feels like an outright necessity if I don't want to get caught out in front of a minigun dozer. The second wave of sniper spawns also forced me to break the rules, but what can you do? This at least allowed passage to the streets, where I Goomba stomped this guy on the way down. I have no idea how injured SWATs keep ending up down here. They're not fixed spawns like the others down the corridor. The escape was made much easier by opening up this door to take cover in, taking out one of the nasty minigun dozer spawns that followed me up here, before sprinting to move the cars out of the way for Twitch whilst my Jokers worked as distractions. An FAK heavy one, but still a decent first time clear. The yacht heist is more simple stealth this deep into the run, slipping up a couple of times but not before the saw handled the situation. Down in the bowels of the ship, I still had 2 pages left over to deal with these 2 numbskulls, removing any risk from the rest of the heist. Undercover is one of those heists I'd love to be allowed to shoot on, but sadly that's no longer an option as these guys are not tied to objective progression. Instead, they're a thorn in my side for the next 10 minutes. Alex did his job properly and dropped the taxman on the roof, which ironically is never the best RNG to roll, as it leaves you at the mercy of snipers from all sides, resulting in the laser show you're witnessing now. The only way through, FAK spam, and the immense power of Die Hard, a skill that enables me to take 50% less damage whilst interacting with things, which stacks on top of Stoic's own DR effect, at times allowing me to passively out-heal the damage I'm taking, and crucially charge up another sip of the good stuff. It cost me almost half my healing resources, but through sheer tenacity I wrangled the taxman out of there, clearing a path on the staircase down to the bottom floor for questioning. This is now my house, with cops bundling up at choke points such as these doorways like lambs to the slaughter. They forced me out of my element by turning off the power upstairs, but that was a short-lived sprint through sniper fire compared to the all-out brawl I'd already survived, meaning this wasn't enough to set us off the path to victory, completing the third hack segment and racing to the top floor without tasting another sniper round. Another solid clear, but even that doesn't give me much confidence heading into what I now believe to be the absolute apex of difficulty when it comes to these Payday challenge runs. Slaughterhouse is a monster at all stages of the heist. Admittedly, I'm well equipped for combat inside the slaughterhouse itself, even tearing through this random skulldozer spawn that would catch out most rule sets early on. But when it comes to taking on the great outdoors, I've not got a lot going for me. Incredibly, I had 5 bags of gold in the shipping container before the dreaded snipers even showed up, but even after getting this great RNG, moving the final 3 felt like an impossibility. Chewed up and spat out in an instant the second I stepped outside again, with a flashbang adding insult to injury as I was unable to drop another FAK in time. Whilst getting that lucky on this heist doesn't tend to happen often, I do feel I mistimed that sprint into the abyss and could have done things differently, running it back on attempt 2. Finding the keycard here is absolutely pivotal to easing through the early stages of this one, blocking off the main spawn path that makes moving the loot within the warehouse difficult. Taking 4 bags at a time initially, I was able to move quickly along the conveyor belt to again make serious inroads prior to the spawn of snipers. In fact, they didn't even hit until I was moving the final bag, surviving right where I'd previously fallen and securing that last bag required to put the crane in motion. The adaptation I've made in more recent challenges at this stage is to sprint back inside, this time heading all the way up to the meat factory officers, whilst my Jokers did a surprisingly excellent job at slowing down the pursuing cops. With the main spawn here blocked off, I was able to hold out most of the trap moving section without even seeing a regular unit, although I made up for this lost time when heading back to move the gold as the snipers zeroed in on me. At least I had this nice single entrance container for cover, dropping the couple of dozers who managed to locate me from safety before the final sprint opened up. This is yet another RNG fest, which decided to bless me for once, with no major roadblock standing between me and lighting the trap for a clean getaway, with the L1 earning the Making a Statement achievement for the first time ever by not touching the overwatching snipers, something I haven't even done on the Throwables only run. Locks on the scene next with Beneath the Mountain, a much more straightforward heist than Slaughterhouse, at least as long as you avoid getting bogged down at the entrance gates, losing my first run at the hands of the overhead turret, which I just couldn't do much about. A slightly more forgiving layout in Attempt 2 avoided a similar incident, although I still had an absolute nightmare opening the control room without any jokers at my side. That resource costly opening section didn't have much bearing on the loot portion of this one, at least once I built up the courage to charge down this fixed sniper dozer combo, which was pretty cathartic as the only chance I'll ever get to get this up close and personal with the little cowards. Honestly, it feels like I'm only just properly learning how to efficiently take down dozers again with this build ever since they moved the Saw's hitbox to the centre of the screen. I know it's logical, but this is what it's like to relearn a decade of muscle memory. One positive once I made it topside was that I rolled into a low sniper spawn seed, meaning I didn't spend the next 5 minutes planting C4 on satellite dishes whilst catching sniper rounds in my hip flask, which is the only canonical way Stoic functions, right? That led to a relatively uncontested escape in the now refueled chopper for a respectable second time clear. Birth of Sky, though, is a massive step up on the difficulty front. At least I know I shouldn't get shot out the sky with Stoic equipped, but even my alcoholism isn't enough to feel safe once on solid ground. Rebuilding the broken pallet first, this one felt like something straight out of a zombie flick, with cops climbing up the side of the gas station and being repelled by what amounts to a chainsaw. Even the school dozers were getting in on the action. I swear I've never seen the big fellas moving like this. Snipers started spawning in during the second pallet's removal, making actually tying this one to Lot's chopper a bit of a crapshoot, chewing through my healing resources which I already know will be necessary for the escape. Refueling on the diner roof with the final money pallet at least gave me a momentary reprieve before the final sprint to the sewers. Despite how tanky Stoic effectively makes you, against 3 spawning school dozers, there's no guarantee of safety, as the entire place seemed to collapse in on me within seconds of touching down. Before I could drop an FAK, this taser took my attention, meaning I mistimed the heal and unfortunately couldn't survive the damage over time effect. But in a moment of genuine providence for this run, I rolled into what I think might be the first ever 15% Feign Death basic roll. Yes, Feign Death procs just under 50% at the time when aced out, but this was a proper Hail Mary usage of 3 skill points for me heading into this heist, which for the first time ever has paid off. You heard it here first, never stop gambling, 99% of heisters quit before Payday 3 gets good. With that extremely lucky second chance at life, I was not making a mistake from here, wiping out the remaining dozers and rushing to the second thermite gate without a second thought. There was no ambush at the turn, meaning access to the boat was all but guaranteed, speeding away to both the luckiest and most satisfying completions of this entire run. Still buzzing off the dopamine, Heat Street's first turn managed to bring me down to earth, as, not for the first time, I really struggled to make it past that initial cop roadblock. Without armor-gating, Stoic feels fairly rough up against the power of the beat cop, dealing more damage than I could out-heal on attempts 1 through 3. On run 4 I just straight up ignored that pause for a joker, instead charging headlong into the damage and just about forcing my way through 2 FAKs later. This will matter later on, but for now it's just a case of burning Matt out of the van. It took a fair few gas counters for this version of Matt to give in, but after about 8 minutes, that was all the heat he could take, pushing up alongside him straight past the SWAT van turret which had pinned me down earlier. Snipers on this heist are normally a minor threat, but here they were kinda chewing up the landscape, actually needing to use Matt as mobile cover to survive this push along the crossroads and make it to the final street. Again, a combination of snipers and suppressing fire from a SWAT van turret made this a nightmare, desperately trying to juggle the aggro whilst moving Matt across the coverless sections of the road, but coming away with just a couple of first aid kits remaining for the final holdout, ruining the 2 I wasted early into this one. I managed to repel the dozers at the helicopter site, but was starting to panic now I know Bile can pull out if left hanging for too long, in full knowledge that there was no way I was surviving another stroll past those snipers. Just in time, with no healing left on the map, the assault wave started pulling out, giving Matt the signal to stumble aboard and clearing this heist with just the barest of resources remaining. And if I'm struggling with Heat Street, you know its big brother Green Bridge is going to give us similar issues with its sniper-covered escort sections. Attempt 1 hit the ground within a minute, again softened up too heavily by the standard beat cops first on the scene. I survived those on attempt 2, and despite being repelled up the road on a few occasions, located the giant in the third of the 3 well-placed police trucks we always saw into. Unfortunately, and this goes to show just how much footage ends up on the cutting room floor for these videos, my hard drive was full of Payday 2 saw clips, to the extent that Shadowplay stopped recording the final section of this epic of a heist and didn't bother letting me know. Gutted to not get to flex a fairly clean green bridge for once, but for reference the prisoner was picked up on the first pass, and Stoic is more than tanky enough to just run up to the Skulldozer spawns that normally catch me out at the escape without worrying about the repercussions, clearing one of the last major hurdles on this run off camera. After a little file reorganisation, we're back with Alaskan Deal, which presented me with this opportunity to satisfyingly chop down a row of shields, which really is what the saw does best now. Otherwise, not a ton to write home about. The cops have got really good at disrupting the refueling section, but that never put me in much direct danger, and then the escape on the boat made no sense as we apparently just took off with half the Alaskan SWAT team still on board, assumedly newfound allies for the Payday gang. With the struggles I've had in stealth in mind, I decided to go fully loud for the diamond heist next, which worked out extremely well, moving the CFO quickly to the roof. I've no idea why so many classic heists involve these escort sections, by the way, before using the information gained from his poor broken body to make our way inside the vault. After a bit of reorientating, I actually managed to go toe-to-toe with the SWAT turret spawn, meaning I literally sawed it out of the roof, which I wasn't even sure would be possible prior to this run, but now you know. The bag moving was fairly uninterrupted. Again, any heist with few snipers tends to fall in my favour, resulting in a healthy sub-18 minute clear. Reservoir Dogs Day 2 is as simple as it comes for this stage in the run, with the only noteworthy event being the use of the saw to speed up my sprint back to the warehouse with the diamonds. Another easy day with 12 heals left in the tank. The same can't be said of Day 1 though, as that initial ambush is always a brutal roll of the dice. Dropping Shotproof Ace proved to be a killer mistake on attempt 1 at this, with the taser holding me in place for this dozer to finish off, whilst I repelled the initial assault on attempt 2, only to be caught completely off guard by the second wave through the elevators, hit by my poor ammo management and an untimely reload. I managed to convert an ally immediately on attempt 3, which was crucial in splitting the aggro and making sure the beat cop surge was easier to repel, although being forced across the lobby to the alternative security system hack was a bit of a nightmare, testing my luck a couple of times as the second Skulldozer wave landed, using up 6 FAKs just to make it this far into the heist. Once that door's open though, this one really stretches out, basically meaning there's more space to throw off the cop AI. This was essential in getting the vault open, and is probably the facet of Payday 2's combat this particular run has taught me the most about. Staying mobile is a must when you have effectively no range. What I do have is an absolute shit ton of DPS from 1 meter out, meaning despite being buffeted around and totally discombobulated once the vault opened, because this couple of dozers managed to stack up for a joint soaring, I was eventually able to gain full control over the diamond storage and start moving the bags one by one. Again, this is that adaptation at play, staying mobile and proccing the fear effect to throw off my pursuers, rather than getting bogged down messing around with the zipline. Stoic also encourages this, and you can use those moments in and out of cover to recharge your flask, securing bag number 6 with 14 minutes on the clock and 3 FAKs remaining. This was more than enough healing to sprint across the road and into the side streets, picking up another couple of dozer beatdowns on the way out for a shockingly painless third time Res Dogs clear. And if Reservoir Dogs is easy enough, Brooklyn Bank's unlikely to offer too many pitfalls, although fair play to these lads charging headlong into a lunatic with a saw just to kick the objective. That's some serious dedication to the cause. I rolled into the thermal drill RNG, which is ideal with drill skills equipped, carving a path inside the vault within 10 minutes, and then noticing this tiny saw icon on the medallion's lockbox. For years I assumed this required a 20-second lockpick to open, but apparently not, unlocking immediate access to the sewer escape. Breaking Feds is the final stealth-only heist on this run, and although I don't like patting myself on the back too often, I've got this one down to a pretty fine science. The spy cams are a perfect replacement for trip lasers to keep an eye on the guards around Garrett's office, and after moving him about 10 feet away from his safe, I got extremely lucky with my usual guess of 1234 for the code, getting my hands on the coffer immediately and speedrunning my exit just over 5 minutes in, even after being caught on the way out. Henry's Rock was a different beast though, slamming down heavily on my resource pool from minute 1 onwards, as the cops were relentless and all over the objectives, halting the chemical compound production at the labs, which always throws me for a loop in terms of how to proceed. Not only did this set me back in terms of sunk time, it also cost me half a dozen FAKs as I was whittled away at and far too trigger happy with their usage. This is the first heist I can remember ever losing via a war of attrition this badly on a challenge run, imbibing 14 whole first aid kits in addition to 2 medic bag charges, and getting revived twice by feigned death and still somehow running out of HP completely, all in just over 13 minutes, which is the real embarrassment. I was much more frugal on the run-back attempt, helped by a smoother run through the lockdown section which had proven so costly the first time around. The archives are also my personal favourite RNG role, meaning coffer 1 was all but secured. Forced back into the open to secure the second coffer from the storage facility, I was again placed in some uncomfortable positions, but no storm I couldn't weather, making the final push back to the entrance and switching off the turrets via their power boxes. This section cost me even more heals, so it's a good job I saved so many going into it, making one final sprint to the helipad to secure the coffers and make it out alive. Shacklethorn now, which I've got all the tools to handle in this build, actually managing to stealth security box hacks, which saves a ton of time, before landing on the auctioneer to steal his keycard and speed through the vault code hack, at least once I could catch a glimpse of what it said around this oddly placed ragdoll. Usually the 20-second lockpick doors present a problem when seeking out a blowtorch, but that's where the saw's secondary utility comes in handy, giving me all I need to break into the vault and peel away the obsidian plate, securing it and an escape in just over 10 minutes. Hell's Island has a few moments I'm concerned for, but nothing in the first half of the heist, surviving the initial ambush through sheer tankiness and making sure to fully refuel my ammo supply before heading out to meet with Locke and Bane on the battlements, as this is the only chance I'd have for the final charge. Crucially, I held this ammo back for the first rest stop Locke takes, allowing the regular spawns to pull, as kills are what's required to quickly move him on from here, achieving that in decent time, meaning at least we don't have to worry about being timed out, which was my major concern heading in. I still needed to avoid an untimely death during the final hectic holdout next to the helipad, but once Locke was on the move once more, we made it there with about 20 seconds to spare. No wonder, as Locke seems to have forgotten Bane again, but I'm sure we'll get over it. The Payday 3 writers seem to have done so just fine. That brings us on to No Mercy, which is always a bit of a victory lap at this stage. Admittedly, I need to make a few adaptations for this build, switching over to Jack of all trades for a bonus ammo bag to truly go to town. And with this exceptionally close range heist giving me the license to do just that, I had a blast ripping and tearing my way through the hospital corridors. The saw feels so solid at this point, without totally circumventing its obvious weakness, which is what really made this run so interesting and fun to play through. It's a good job I remembered all those extra blades though, as I located the patient in the third and final room, meaning this heist was about as stretched out as it could be, using up all the bonus ammunition I brought over the course of a 25-minute beatdown with almost 300 kills, comfortably my most prolific and messiest heist of the entire run. With only the stealthable White House standing between us and a clear victory, I decided to rekindle what's become a bit of a tradition for this series and first try to take on the heist to end all heists in loud from minute 1. As you might have guessed, this wasn't the brightest move I could make, but here's the final build heading in, just short of level 100, which would have provided 3 more nice to have skill points, and rocking that extra ammo bag rather than the potential security of shotproof and feigned death haste. Back onto the heist, the wirebox hack section went smooth enough, not costing me a single heal, and the saw comes in incredibly handy at the Oval Office when locating the thermite before the mercs catch up, actually managing to open the safe and secure the key to the POG with 9 first aid kits remaining, about as well as I can really imagine this section going. I've just sort of got the saw combat loop down at this point, especially into dozers. But once at the mainframe down below the White House, the scale of the task I was attempting at this melee range quickly comes into view. The cops are relentless these days when it comes to shutting down the power, and each trip into gas or facing down a roof turret to turn that power back on comes at the cost of non-recoverable resources time and time again. Even with Bulletstorm and its power of endless soaring, I just don't have the DPS to charge into groups of cops, just barely surviving this run-in with a Taser Dozer combo, but going down to just 1 remaining heal in the tank before the first hack was even complete. That said, I locked in for hacks 2 and 3, making full use of the hostage taker healing and staircase back topside to just about keep my head above water, completing the final 2 hacks at the cost of only 1 FAK. Unfortunately, that was the final one I held, meaning if I'd been as frugal earlier on in the heist, I might have just made it through. But after opening the vault and rushing in for the pardons, it was only a matter of time before I was overwhelmed, unable to escape my own self-made prison, and finally put down for good after a 33-minute slugfest. When you beat, I suppose, as there's no way I'll be running this torture back in a hurry so soon after Payday, switching over to stealth instead. Except this wouldn't be a Yelwonk run without at least one more sting in its tail, as after making it to the Peok first time of asking, I made a rookie error with the guards that spawn down there. I'd remembered that if you take them hostage, you avoid the 4th patrol spawning in, which is crucial as I only had 3 pages remaining thanks to taking out cams upstairs. The issue is, I thought you only had to dominate the final guard, meaning you can visually witness my surprise through the gameplay when this 4th bloke rocked up and started shooting without asking any questions. A painstaking way to waste another 10 minutes of my life, as this was pager number 5. Lesson re-remembered, hopefully permanently this time as I cruise through the presidential suite section once more, this time without dealing with cams, just in case the old domination strategy had been sneakily patched out by the sidetrack boys, but I over-prepared for nothing because it turns out you can just dominate all 3 guards down here separately, and that will result in no additional spawns. A really useful tech to take the risk out of the most gut-wrenching section of this one, if you know what you're doing on the earlier objectives, giving me free reign over the Peok and its elusive pardons, before strolling back to the front of the White House in casing mode to complete both the heist and this entire run. I'm going to be honest with you, I was absolutely bricking this one when I kicked it off a few weeks back. I knew stealth soaring was back and wasn't the least bit worried about those heists, but the idea of taking on the likes of Meltdown, the Biker Heist and Slaughterhouse, all without touching a hair on the head of snipers, filled me with dread, hence my willingness to go with Stoic for the perk deck, which is something I've outright banned in the past. I mean, not using it for the Demo Man was a sin, but it's just because it's so powerful. But in my opinion, that defensive power was an outright necessity for this run in particular. So what have we learned? Well, the Sword's pretty fantastic now, obviously as a secondary option in most sensible builds, but it really does fend for itself in ammo-tight situations after the sidetrack buffs. Give it a go yourself if you haven't had the chance to try out the update since it released on PC. Also, I have to apologise for the double rule break on Panic Room and Brooklyn 1010. I really can't think of another way around that if you guys want to see these challenges have a shot at reaching their full conclusion. I mean, it's not like we were struggling that heavily at that stage. Unlike with the failed no shooting run from years ago, I didn't feel it was right to cut it short at this obvious roadblock. If you are fine with this, for these 2 heists specifically, it does open up a ton of interesting rule sets that might otherwise be impossible just because of the sniper killing requirements. So let me know in the comments how you'd like me to handle them moving forward. Thank you so much for watching, guys. As ever, have a fantastic week. June's shaping up to be an excellent month for Payday fans, so stay tuned, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.